Hello and welcome back to Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems podcast with myself, Roland Hume, and Craig Touch, the founder of Hidden Gems Books. It's a podcast where we talk about all of the challenges and opportunities about this crazy business we're in, writing and self-publishing. And today we are very excited to have a special guest, Bradley Charbonneau, who is here to talk to us about writer's block. Writer's block is something that all of us experience, and there are so many different tips and tricks about how to overcome writer's block. But what Bradley talks about is kind of like an unorthodox view that I know resonated with me, and I'm sure it'll resonate with many of you. So good morning, Bradley. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And of course, we have Craig Touch, the writer himself and the owner and founder of Hidden Gems Books. How are you doing today, Craig?
Good. Thanks, Roland. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Bradley. You and I, we were just talking about this earlier. You wrote a blog for us 4 years ago, which we're both shocked on. Time is flying by.
Yeah.
But you're sort of like the go-to guy for productivity and for writing and like, just putting in the effort and the work and getting it done and figuring out ways to break your mental blocks and to just produce the content, right? You've had a number of podcasts, you still run one, you've written tons of books. So yeah, we're super excited to hear about what you have to say about all this kind of stuff.
Great. I'm so happy to be here. I actually can't believe I was just looking it up. It's been 4 years. That's yeah. But then in sort of the dog years of COVID, it's kind of 2, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the amazing thing is, you were saying too, like that article was titled something like "Write Every Day," right? And that's something that you do and you have done since that 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, in fact, that's kind of the only thing that keeps me going. And especially through COVID as well, is, oh, what do I do? Oh, I guess oh, wait a minute, it's another day. I guess I'm supposed to be writing. And it's just that, the simplicity.
I imagine that's what, if you have writer's block, you can't write every day. So you figured out some ways to get around that.
Yeah, absolutely. But in fact, you say if you have writer's block, you can't write every day unless you have like an internal law that says you have to write every day.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know what your criteria for writing every day is. Like, is it, well, I can't think of anything today, but I need some groceries, so let me write a grocery list. Does that count?
Well, that's a good question about what counts and what doesn't. So here, let's back up almost 10 years to November 1st, 2012, when previous to that, I was not writing at all. And we were also just talking off the air about failure and fear, and how I was not writing because then I couldn't fail at writing. And I thought I was beating the system, right? I thought, oh, I'm gonna win all this thing because I'm not gonna fail. And oh, aren't I a big success here? And I was succeeding at dreaming about writing, about talking about writing, about talking to other people at dinner parties about how I will become a writer someday. But then, that whole someday and tomorrow, they're not on calendars, right? And so finally, this buddy of mine, this colleague of mine, was running this program called Monthly Experiments. And he used to do a thing where, every day for 30 days, no coffee, or every day for 30 days, wake up at 5 a.m. or something. He had all these crazy experiments. And he would take people through 30 days. And, lo and behold, after 30 days, they would discover that, oh, wow, I could actually do that. Or, oh, I don't need so much coffee, or oh, I lost weight, or whatever it was. And for me, he made a custom one. He said, we're going to write every day for 30 days. And for me back then, he might as well have said, we're going to pull off a toenail a day. It's going to hurt. It's going to bleed. You're not going to like it. And it's going to be super hard. And I thought, okay, so if I don't do this, when am I ever going to start? And you know what? It's only 30 days. I can do 30 days. And so I started. I hit publish, and like you, Craig, I also have had a background in IT, and I can do build websites easily. Or back then, I could build websites easily. So I said, you know what? Not only am I gonna write every day, I'm gonna hit publish and make it public. Like, well, I'm pulling out all the stops. But back to your shopping list. My only criteria was that I have to feel okay about it being public. And so I don't care if it's 14 words or 14 pages, whatever. And it wasn't necessarily even a quality or a quantity thing. It was just a like finish thing. I have to have a title, a body, a featured image, and hit publish, and a excerpt. And that was it. And of course, the first few days, it was brutal. It was pulling my toenails off with pliers. It was awful. I hated it. And it was, but because I was on this 30-day challenge, that a friend of mine, makes it even worse if you know the guy, that I had to stick with it. And sure, like, as he knows, with all of his coffee and his wake up early people, he knows people are going to get through it. And so after 15 days, I kind of felt like, wait a minute, I'm actually doing this. I think I can do it. I think I can make it to 30. And I did. And so, for him, it was no big surprise. He's like, oh, good for you, buddy. But for me, this was earth shattering. It's like, wait a minute, I've been talking and whining and moaning and dreaming about writing forever. And now I'm actually doing it. And I'm just going to keep the streak going. And so that was 30 days. I did that. Huge, huge moment for me. I mean, I had my own sort of design agency back then. I had my own company, and which I wasn't loving. And it opened a whole new channel for me. And not to mention, it opened up a little vein of confidence that I definitely didn't have. And that was key. The confidence was key.
Well, confidence is, you can't get anything done without confidence, I think. But, it's so funny to me that it shows a lot about who you are. Like, you had this challenge, right? 30-day challenge. Just the challenge is write every day. The challenge was not put together a website and publish a blog every day. And you're like, oh, it sounded like it was going to be impossible, so I made it harder. Like that says something about you, right? Right. You're putting the work in, and you haven't stopped since then, I guess, right?
Yeah. So from 30 days, I just kept going, and I hit 60, and then I hit 100, and at 100, I kind of thought, oh, maybe that's a nice round number. I'll just go for 365, make it a year, and then I was just in the flow. And like a runner, you don't just go run the marathon. It's like, hey, you want to run a marathon this weekend? Sure, let's go. No, I guess you could, but it's going to be really painful a few days after. And so I was in shape. I was in writing and creating shape. And so it wasn't painful anymore to write. And I got to the point where I needed it. It was almost like an addiction to a drug at that point, that I needed that daily fix, that daily hit of that creativity, and to let it out of me on a daily basis. And I'm like, okay, I check, brush teeth, write post, done.
It's funny. I was just thinking the other day, when I used to have the streaks of writing every day, the first thing I noticed was that's what makes having a career as a self-published author sustainable. It's like when I was writing every single day and publishing, whenever I finished it, I could support my family doing writing and nothing else. And as a writer, we always come up with a million reasons not to write, but it's definitely those things. And my career has gone from ups and downs and ups and downs. The ups are always when you write every single day. I think if you write every single day for long enough, you cannot fail but become a successful writer. But it's doing it, isn't it? And that's the thing. And it's that confidence. I know when you had the downslides, you just feel like, what am I going to do? Why am I bothering to write this thing if it's not going to be successful? Or maybe it's what you said resonated with me. Yeah.
Well, and then, like you said, oh, what am I going to do if it's not successful? But at some point there was this twist that I didn't care anymore about success in those terms, in terms of what society thinks of success, right? The money and the fame and the fortune and all that. This was like brushing my teeth. And this was important. Well, it's even more important than brushing my teeth. This was my daily jolt of energy and creativity, and I needed it. I needed it. I needed it every day. And speaking of daily, I mean, I used to joke about every other day. Oh, would that work? And I thought, yeah, but what if the month ends on the 31st, and then there's the 1st, and what do I do then? Right? Just stop with the complications. Every single day. That's it.
And I imagine that actually is going to keep you from getting a lot of writer's block too, because you're so used to writing. It's like, the way you were saying, like you needed that fix. It almost reminds me of, not from personal experience, but what people say about exercising and how, when you do it every day, you sort of need to do it every day. You get that sort of runner's high, or you get the, the endorphin rush. And I haven't ever exercised in a sustained period to get that level. but the writer stuff is the same sort of thing. Because when I was writing novels all the time, and I wrote a lot of novels back then, it was so much easier than it is now, right? Because now I'm so busy running the site that often I don't have time to do a lot of writing. And when I do, even when I'm writing a short, intro to a blog, or putting together some descriptions for stuff, like it takes me far longer to put it together than it would have, a couple of years ago when I was doing much more writing almost every day, or in a sustained period. So I think that's one of the keys to beating writer's block, is you probably won't even get it in the first place if you have these kind of habits where you're writing every day, even if it's not like you might be blocked on your book, but that doesn't mean you can't write, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's those tricks that say just get out the paper and the pen or the blank screen on the laptop and just, oh, you don't have anything? Okay, start with, I don't have anything to write, period. I don't have anything to write, period. And you probably won't even get to 10 of those. And something's going to come up. And like you say, I might be stuck on the book I'm working on, but then that was sort of that was the beauty and the curse of it as well, because I'm like, okay, I'm not working on the book. Okay, let's go with, I don't have anything to write today. I don't have anything. Wait, whoa, wait a minute. Something's coming. And then something comes, and it's some new idea, and I go off on some tangent. And then that was the question of, oh, was that just a fun little tangent that distracted me? Or is it something possible that's a new idea, that's a new book, or maybe even a new series, or a whole new, career? But none of that would have happened had I written nothing. Right. So it was that breakthrough, that the action, the taking action, which we all think is so hard, and it is. I'm not knocking it that it's not hard. It is hard, but it's like the running. Just put on the shoes, go out the door.
And I think that the pressure is probably what causes a lot of people to have the block, right? And by saying I'm going to write every day, or at least, to beat writer's block, I'm going to write something completely different. Like, I don't know what to write, or you just start writing like, once upon a time there was, you just start making it up. But what people have to sort of do is put aside the pressure that what they're writing has to be something that they then use for productivity, where like they have to put it into their book, or they have to do something else. No, it doesn't have to be, right? Like you're just trying to just get those juices flowing again. And maybe whatever you're writing just gets thrown away, but don't have that pressure that you have to write something that you're going to use somewhere. Right? You're just trying to write,
that is a lot of pressure I know that's one of the things for me. It's like, I've got these 4 books that I want to write, and I'm just not feeling any of them. And so it's kind of, it's like work. You go in, and if it's difficult to write, you kind of feel like it's going to be difficult to read. So
one tactic on that one is, and it's a fun one. I have all kinds of like fun tactics to try, probably because I went through, so I got to 365 days, then I just bulldozed forward to 1,000, which is 3+ years, and then, this is going to sound crazy, I hit 2,000. Now we're starting to talk years at this point, right? And then I finally stopped on 2,808 days, and I actually stopped the day my mother passed away. And it was, I don't know, it just seemed like a moment I stopped with that streak. I said, no, with my mom passing away, it was sort of a end of an era, and it was okay. And actually I was okay with it. And at that point I was in such good shape. I felt like I don't, back to the marathon runner, I don't need to run every day anymore. I've run 14 marathons, so I can do it. Although I got to say, I miss it. It's been more than a year now, and I miss that daily habit. And I think that's, well, actually, here, as I say this out loud and to myself, I miss it. I need it. and I don't have it right now, and I can feel it.
And that's maybe what inspired you to want to talk about it. Because I don't know about you, but when I read your blog post 4 years ago, I was like, made me think of things I've written where I'm like, this is what I want to achieve. So I'm going to write about it and hopefully motivate myself into achieving it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and here we are talking about it, and I'm like convincing myself this is a good idea.
And it is. I mean, and what I'm getting this a lot. I'm like, you know what? Holy crap, he's completely right. We've got to. That's the thing, and it's not even a question of it. It's like, if you want to be a writer, you have to write. Oscar Wilde said we are defined as verbs, not nouns. So therefore, to be a writer, you have to write. You have to do the thing. It's the verb. So it's, at the end of the day, it's a judgment call. Are we serious about being writers? In which case, you have to write.
Yeah. You know, I was going to mention a tactic that I like, and you know, I talk about writer's block a lot and how to get through it, and I have all kinds of fun ways to do it. But one of them I call sort of the opposite book, or the opposite tactic. It's, you know, for example, I had talking with a nutritionist, and she had her best breakfast to, you know, start your day with a bang and keep your energy high all day and end the, you know, good night's sleep or something. And I said, oh, so how's it going? She's like, oh man, I'm just struggling. I can't get it out of me. It's this, you know, I'm working on chapter 6 for 3 months and all that stuff, right? And of course, which we all know and hate. And so my thought was, well, what would the worst breakfast be like? And she's like, oh, well, that's easy, you know. And she's like, well, let me see. We have, you know, we have crispy sugar puffs for breakfast, and then we have like 3 coffees, and then we go back to bed for an hour, and then we don't have any exercise, and we should have more sugar and maybe some caffeine, and we'll guaranteed crash by, you know, 3 p.m. And so the idea of this worst breakfast ever, too. You know, she even had a subtitle. She's like, oh, on the phone, she was so excited. She's like, oh, I got a subtitle. Yeah, it'll be the worst breakfast ever to, you know, ruin your morning, crush your afternoon, and you know, almost die by evening. And like, that's it. And I was thinking, like, I would actually love to know what her worst breakfast idea is, because it would be, for one, it'd be funny, but just seeing her so animated and coming up with these crazy ideas of the opposite of what she, you know, she knows the real book is supposed to be, but you could just see her light up like a light bulb.
And the funny thing is, that's more attractive to readers as well, because it's so unexpected.
Yes, exactly. I even told her, I said, I'm no offense to your nutritional education, but I'd actually buy the book that said the worst breakfast ever, because I know she's going to sneak in some healthy tips in there. But I actually kind of want to read what you think the worst breakfast ever is. And she's like, wow.
How many people are going to be depressed reading that? They're going to be like, wait a second, this is my daily routine. So yeah, I mean, that's a good idea. You know, if you're writing something and you're stuck, then try writing the opposite of that. You know, that could spark all sorts of different thoughts too, right? Because, you know, as a writer, depending on your genre, like a lot of times you don't want to be predictable. So maybe that's a tactic to sort of get you to think outside the box. Like, I know, you know, say you're writing a thriller or a mystery, and you're, you know, I'm writing this thing, and it's going to be the butler did it. Obviously the butler did it, right? And everyone's expecting the butler to do it. So who would be the opposite of the butler? And then you start, and then maybe that makes you think of different ways that your story could go that you weren't expecting. And then that's the reader wouldn't have been expecting either.
Yeah. Chapter 1, first line, the butler did it.
That's right.
That's actually pretty good. I'm taking notes.
So, okay, well, so what are some of the other fun little tactics then?
So others are also, I'm a big audiobook fan, and I narrate my own audiobooks, which I love. And I love partly for the whole theatrical element of it. But also, when I first started doing the audiobooks, I realized that was my best editor, was the reading of your own work. And I got to admit, this one can be kind of brutal, because when you hear it, sometimes you cringe, like, oh, this is bad. But you know what? It's a truthful, honest editor. And, you know, we may not always want that, because we may, you know, that chapter was pretty bad. But you actually do want to know that. As much as you don't want to hear it, you want to know early on, ideally, that you find that that was a bad chapter, then the readers say that was a bad chapter. And so for one option is to just read your work, read your work aloud that you've already written. But another one is dictation path. And so something you haven't written yet, and you head out into I live in the forest here. I'd head out into the woods with my dog, and I'd hit record on my voice recorder phone thing, and chapter 4, here we go, and just blab, and not worrying about this is going to be perfect, and not the whole dictation thing, comma, open quote, he said, not that, just blab, just like paper, you'd blab, but audio. And what happens then is, our audio creating minds are different than our pen and paper or text and computer creating minds. And we often get these different perspectives that come in. Even if we're talking, we're talking about the same book, the same characters, the same chapter that I've been struggling with on my computer, and now I go out into the woods and talk it out. It's almost like a different person's coming in and approaches it. So that's a really fun one. And it can be really creative as well. And you're almost guaranteed you're going to get a different perspective than your usual, let me type the words onto the computer here.
I think you had a real nugget of wisdom in there as well, where you said, don't worry about the dictation software or the open quotes. Because I think a lot of us procrastinators were like, oh, well, I'll go out and do the read it out loud, but I'll have to get the Dragon software and make sure that I train it. So, and you come up with obstacles for that. But you're right. If you do that and then listen to it, that's great advice.
And obstacles are a writer's, best friend and worst enemy, right? I mean, we love them. I mean, you know what? I should research the software for dictation for at least 4 months. I've got to get the right one. And I think it's going on sale in November. So I'm going to wait.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I find when I'm writing or when I'm sort of, I guess, editing something, a lot of times I'll read it out loud to myself, sitting here in my office, and I'll just be reading it out loud, because I think you hear different things than when you're writing it and reading it. The visual learner versus the auditory learner, like it's just a different, it uses different parts of your brain, I guess. And you'll see things like I'll scan over a paragraph and it'll sound fine to me, and then I'll read it out loud and I'll be like, wait, no, something's wrong there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that reading it back, so there's two things we're really talking about there. One was the whole dictation, blabbing it out in the woods, and the other is then the reading back what you've wrote as if you're the narrator, and not that you're necessarily going to be your own narrator, but to really read it. And as she walked down the path, and then she turned and saw him, and do your best to see how this really going to work, because the scene. And I'm not saying you have the best voice and you're all the right equipment. Again, don't worry about that stuff. It's really just the action.
Yeah, one's more about editing and one's more about, I guess, the writing. I've never tried to write a book through like just by speaking it. I don't know how well that would work for me, but I've never actually tried it. I do know that there are some writers that's how they write. They don't really type. I guess at some point they do, but they use the dictation software or whatever, and they just talk into it and write. I don't know that if that would work for me or not, but I guess I've never actually tried it.
Do you know all those cheesy movies about writers where the person's writing and they read what they're writing at the same time? It's like they're clack, 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 and he's going, and she walked down the thing. I do that. I cringe when I do it. I put on like the soundtrack to a movie that's won her alibi about a writer, and I'm like typing that, listening to it, reading it out loud as if I'm in a movie, and that makes me get into the zone. And I think, again, because it's conversational, you end up writing words that sound better.
Yeah. Well, like you say, that's actually really cool. You put the movie background music on, because even if you can you create this whole scene you got the music, and now you're going to speak the role, and in your head what it's kind of supposed to sound like, so you make it sound like that, and that can really work.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
are you doing the voices while you're like the in a world where
I literally do that. It sounds so stupid, but I mean, I am in some ways a
That's great.
cliche. I'm like a British writer of lurid romance books, so I'm like sitting there going like, he tore her lingerie off, and she squealed in horror and arousal, and then you've got the violin soundtrack in the background, and I'm like, yeah, I'm watching a movie about some wanker writer, middle-aged wanker who writes lurid romance novels, and that's what he's doing, and it's kind of fun.
I can see you just cracking up doing this too,
Yeah.
and laughing like at yourself and with yourself while you're doing it. That's classic. That's super fun. I mean, and speaking of laughing at yourself, that's a big element of several things we've already talked about. Getting over that whole the pressure and the prizes and the winnings and it's just we've got to get over. I spent 9 years not writing so I wouldn't have to fail. And do I regret those? Yeah.
And it's funny because every single day it like accumulates. But just like if you're writing every single day, imagine what you've created at the end of 9 years, as opposed to not writing every day.
Well, I can tell you what I created in 9 years. Nothing.
Yeah.
I think
that hurts. That hurts.
It would be terrifying to meet the person who you could have been if you'd written every single day for them.
Yeah.
Don't fill him with regret.
Yeah. Well, what's that Chinese saying? The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, and the second best time is today.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I'm in the same boat. I spent a lot of time not writing. That was my goal when I went to university, got sidetracked for 20 years, and then came back to it. And, there's regret there. But part of it was a big part of it was the fear of failure and the fear of and convincing yourself, not even that you're thinking to yourself necessarily of failure, but you put all those obstacles in your head. Like self-publishing wasn't a thing back then, maybe vanity presses or whatever, but it was, if you were going to write, you've got to write your book, you got to send it to your publisher, and then you got to get rejected, and then you got to do that again. And I think, I put all those obstacles in my head, like, it'll never work, I'll never be able to do it. And those are a form of writer's block, at least in the sense that not just that I'm sitting down and unable to write, but I'm blocking myself from sitting down at all.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like, why bother? I know all the steps towards failure. Why even go down that path?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think taking the pressure off and, of just saying, I'm just going to write. And it doesn't have to be about anything that I'm trying to sell or that I'm trying to make a career out of. I'm just going to write to keep those skills honed and ready to go for when I am ready,
Yeah.
I heard a saying, somebody said writers are like rats, and rats, they have their incisors, and if they don't gnaw on wood, their incisors keep growing until they can literally impale themselves. People like writers need to write every single day, because otherwise they're going to go crazy. And I think there is something to that. There's the whole idea of going to the flow state, and the flow state is the only time your brain releases like serotonin and dopamine and everything. And I think beyond just whatever you create as a writer, there is something psychologically beneficial to entering that flow state, the same as going to the gym for an hour.
Yeah. But I believe that flow state is really hard to achieve if you have all those pressures of the best and the greatest and the money and the fame and all that. Then it's going to be you're going to be cowering in the corner, just like the rat in the corner with the long fangs.
My most successful period as a writer was when it was my most successful period as a writer, because I kind of took a break from the worthy book that I was writing, and I wrote this lurid romance book that became an accidental bestseller. And then I wrote another one that continued that, and I was on a streak. And when you're on a streak, it's so easy to be like, I'm on a streak, and write with 2,000 words. And the more you're on a streak, the more it continues. And for me, when Amazon changed certain things and it became so much more challenging to make a book successful, that's when the motivation like sapped out of me, because you're like, why am I doing this if I'm going to make half the money that I used to or whatever?
Yeah.
And it was the confidence during your streak, that I think is what kept you on that streak. You had that confidence. You didn't lose it to say, oh, I can't, if you all of a sudden had a flop, then, even though you're doing everything the same, all of a sudden now it would be harder to write, right? Because you'd be like, okay, well, I've lost it. you know, in your head, you're like, I had it before and now it's gone. I've lost my abilities, my skills, whatever.
Well, it's funny as you said, oh, you had a flop, but also what I found is that I'm really working hard on my masterpiece here, and it's going to be fantastic, and I'm stuck, so I'm going to go work on this, you know, crappy jokey book temporarily, and I do that, and which is, you know, it's really bad or silly, or it's just not up to my standards, and I get it out there, or maybe I publish it, or maybe I share it or something, and people really like it, and I think, how do you like that? You can't like that. That's like my side joke tangent book. What do you mean you like that book? I'm working on my masterpiece here. You know, this is serious. And they're like, I'm not really interested in your masterpiece. You're going to continue on that fun series, the jokey one? And
get out of my head, Bradley.
Yeah, but back to flow state, because if I'm, you know, this whole masterpiece idea, because believe me, I'm the guiltiest of all with not working on the masterpiece, because that whole fear of being the masterpiece. And so then I've had, you know, 31 tangents in the meantime, and people say, oh, I really like that one. I said, yeah, I can't wait till you get my masterpiece. And I'm not, what's it about? I'm like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. I'm not really interested in the masterpiece. I want more of the tangential stuff. And then ideally, then you find that flow state in the tangent, because even maybe like subconsciously you're thinking, oh, well, there's no pressure here because this is not my masterpiece. And then
it ends up being a masterpiece.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and you secretly are a happy, successful writer. Oops.
You think of Frankenstein. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein in 4 days, and she wrote it to basically try and avoid Byron getting into her pants. And that's become a timeless classic, and she invented the horror genre.
Yeah, you know, like I've that's something I've always sort of struggled with myself. And I find that with my kids too, that's one of the things they struggle with, is the idea, and this is sort of the more traditional sort of writing advice, which is, you know, your first draft should just be, you know, like garbage. It should just be, you just write it as fast as you can, get all your ideas out, and then you polish it later, instead of, you know, trying to make your first draft your only draft, your final draft, your polished draft, right? And that's always something I have a problem with. You know, I'm a perfectionist or whatever. I want to make so I'll go back and I'll write a paragraph, and then I'll rewrite the paragraph, and I'll rewrite the paragraph until it's perfect. And then I'll go to the next one. Right. And that's such a slow way of doing it. And then I found, you know, watching my kids struggling with a writing assignment, and that was sort of their issue too. They were like, you know, oh, it's not good, I don't know. And I'm like, just get all your ideas. And I can give that advice, but you know, it's hard for me to take it myself too. I know that it's right. I know it's the right advice, but sometimes it's hard to push against your natural sort of inclination.
Yeah.
Right.
The first draft of the story is you telling yourself the story.
Yes. And that's what it needs to be. And it won't be a perfect story. You can fix that later, but it's impossible when you try to make it, you know, the first draft. Yeah.
You mentioned kids, and I found also here's another tactic. It's the conversation. And so you're with a friend, or better yet, kids, because they just see things so differently. But talk through your chapter, talk through your story, talk through where you're stuck. And so have and no paper and pen. You're in a cafe, or you're with your kids, or you're on a walk, or ideally somewhere where it's not overly focused on, like they say, I have 2 boys, and they say you're not, if you really want to talk to them, don't look at them like face to face. Don't sit down. I'm in this chair and you're in that chair. No, son. No, that's they're just going to be like, and they're going to shut down. They say, it's really interesting. They say, go side by side, face forward, like a car situation, and talk then. I'm like, oh, okay, good tip. And so similarly, talk through your book. Say, hey, Craig, can I just tell you about this one chapter? Okay, so first this happens, then this happens, then Amy comes in, then Mary comes in, and then this is supposed to happen. What do you think? Does that make sense? And you're just talking through it, and then the other person may or may not have any idea what you're talking about. But if they can give any sort of sounding board, anything at all, because really what you're doing is you're working through it yourself. You just need that ideally a human. I mean, a dog works too, but humans sometimes better. But dogs work too, actually. I often tell my dog my stories, and he's like, that's great. Just give me another snack.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I've done that with my own kids, not even necessarily about writing, just about business, about whatever. I just tell them, and I try to make it in my head like, oh, this is a learning thing that I'm going to tell them some stuff so that they understand how the world works. But really, I'm talking it through just so I can solidify things in my head and figure out what I'm going to do in my head. And I think with writing that works. Maybe not with Roland and his kids, you know, if he doesn't maybe want to tell them about his romance scenes and talk through that. So he ripped off her lingerie, and then I'm not sure what we should do at that point. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I was designing a lurid cover for one of my novels, which I'm quite proud of, and my daughter was there, and she like gave me some tips to change the color scheme, and it looked far better. But I was like, this. If it's only a man's bare chest at one wheel, that's
yeah,
that's really funny.
Yeah, no, that's a good tip for sure.
Yeah, so similar to the talking to yourself, but then having a conversation with someone else and getting that. Again, we're talking about different perspectives, right? Like your own voice was a different perspective than your typing on the keyboard perspective, and the other human perspective is different from yours. And so it's just getting out there.
I mean, that's spectacular advice, though. That really is. I remember I made a course for people, and I was struggling with like, what's this course going to be about? And I kept thinking like making all these promises, but in the end, I was like, I imagined one particular person who I knew, and I imagined making the course for that person. Like, if I wanted to help you, this is what I would do, and it ended up being so much easier because it just flowed out of me like a conversation, as you said.
Yeah, and people love to talk about it. They're especially if people see authors as these like fascinating alien beings, and they're like, "Oh, really? You want to talk to me about your story? Oh, sure, I'd love to." And they actually might listen.
Yeah,
imagine.
Sure. I think that's what I think a lot of authors use their social media, especially like their street teams, their sort of core fans, and they sort of talk out scenes, or they ask them advice. Some of them have polls, or what do you think? Sometimes it's just like name this character, but sometimes it's something a little bit more involved. Should they do A or should they do B, kind of thing, right? So that's probably a form of that as well.
But that's a dangerous tactic, because if you do that, I did that a bit with a spy thriller I'm kind of doing, and you tell so many people about it, in the end you commit yourself to having to write it.
Right. So don't tell them the results of the poll. The answers are in. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Do you have any other tips then?
So another one I like is I'm really big on finishing. We can have the conversation, or I can type terrible blog posts, but the idea of finishing something is key. And we're back to the word confidence. And so that's why also, so for example, I was leading a group of would-be soon-to-be writers, and it's so funny, it's like when you know something so well and the other people don't know it so well, you're like, oh, come on, this is so easy. But slow down here, cowboy, and come back to when you thought it was difficult. I mean, like me in 2012, when I wasn't writing a single word, and now I'm having these guys write. So I wanted to show also, technically, like with apps and software and uploading and formatting and stuff, and even creating a quick cover, right? I wanted to show how quickly it is possible to get a book done. And so because I was talking with this group, and I was almost like bragging about how fast it's possible to get it done, in one morning, I woke up, I had an idea, and I recorded a bunch of it because I wanted to show them, hey, look, here's how fast you can do all this stuff. I had an idea, and the book was going to be a one-word book. And in fact, the book it's now called The One-Word Book That Will Probably Change Your Life. Right? And I made a cover, and then the book really, like chapter 1, and it's the one word. And I should even do a teaser and not tell you guys what it is. And then, but of course it was too short. And so there's like a giant preface and this huge, conclusion thing. But the actual chapter is just one word long. But I had a cover, I had a title, I had a subtitle, I had a preface, and then the actual chapter of the one word. And then this whole conclusion thing at the end. And it's because it had to be a certain amount of pages, minimal for some reason. And I even uploaded it. And I mean, it's even live on all the Amazons and everything out there. Because finishing for me was very important, because you can just, here I am talking about, oh, we have this idea, oh, go talk in the woods. That's great, but it's almost like it's going out into the ether. And whereas putting together something, and ideally small and tiny and simple and easy, but then finishing your idea and completing it is also big, because, well, for example, that's one of my books. Yep, I've written a lot of books. People say, oh, are some of them short? Oh, yes, one of them is one word. Oh, really? But I finished it. I had that one word, that one idea, and I still believe in it. I think it's a great one word. And I finished that project.
I hope that you planned it so the look inside doesn't give it all away,
right? Yeah, I think that I have to make the preface, like 42 pages long. So.
That's right. And it's not in KU, otherwise you're not really making any money.
That's the danger, though, of that, which I think is it's why finishing is so important. Is, I know for me, like, I always procrastinate about clicking publish. I've written the book, I've got it edited, I've got the cover, I've got the keywords, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should wait till Monday till I launch it. And then it's like, oh no, well, I'll wait until I send out my newsletter. And then it's like a week goes by, and you've just got to get over yourself and click the button, and it's difficult sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and that's the upside and the downside of something like an Amazon pre-order date, because I think they're a little bit more flexible now, but they used to be really brutal, and you would lose your rights to pre-order for a year or something if you changed it. And so I just had that thing in stone, and that date is in stone.
I was going to say, do you want to give me a panic attack? Because just the words pre-order give me a panic attack.
Yeah, I think, and that goes towards the confidence, I guess, right? The finish, when you every time you finish something, so it's going to sort of build you up a little bit more. Like, I've done this, I finished this, I started a project, I completed it, it's done, I can move on to the next. And now you're no longer a person who's never written a book, or you're no longer a person who's only written one book, or every completed project builds you up a little bit more.
And also, I mean, my personal belief, if I were the all-being master of time, space, and dimension, which is a Steve Martin reference there, would be, I think everybody should write a book every year and just have it and complete it. They have to finish it. And it could be just one thought, could be 4 pages, I don't care. But because I often tell my writer students, I say, this is your book this year. This is the book that you wrote at this time. That same you cannot write this book of this year with the you of next year. It'll be a different book. So get this one done. And this is the book for now. Get it out there, call it finished. If you need to come back and edit later, fine. But this is really the ideas of your brain, your mind, your imagination, your persona at this time in your life is this book right now. So get it published.
Yeah. That's brilliant advice. I read a book that I wrote like 4 years ago, and I was like, who was this person who wrote this book? And it was good. I enjoyed it, but I was like, I'm not that person right now.
Yeah. And so that right there is I could call it a threat, or I can call it an invitation for people today listening to this in 2022 to get their book done, now or soon, or at least this year, because that's the book that's in you now. And get it out, because next year you're not the same person. It's not the same book.
It's like a personal butterfly effect, right? Like I argue almost like not even a year. If I wrote, a chapter and this week, or I waited till next week or next month, it would probably be a slightly, at least, different chapter than it would have been if I wrote it now. And there's millions of reasons why that might be, right? Even if they're just things like the amount of time you had, or distractions that happened that day versus the next week that caused you to, or some experience you had that gave you a slightly different perspective on whatever it is you're writing. It's always gonna be different, right?
So I got another one for you then on perspective, and you'll notice a theme here. A lot of it's about perspective. So another one is changing your location. And so this is at my normal office. Okay, now I'm in the busy cafe. Now I'm in the quiet library. And even your medium. So this is on this particular laptop. This is on my clunky old desktop. This is on pen and paper in the cafe. And so again, it's different location, different atmosphere, and different perspective. And maybe that wouldn't work for same chapters of the same book. Maybe that would be too discombobulated. But if you're stuck, change up your location.
I found one thing that worked was like you reach your limit with your writing. There's the pressure to like, oh, I'm going to write if I write 5,000 words a day, then I'm going to do this, and that's not sustainable. So you can write like to a certain point, and then you can spend the rest of the day marinating on it and planning what you're going to write the next day. So when you go into it, it's like, I've got to get this stuff out. And I think maybe a lot of us like shut down and we're like, I'm not going to think about it. And you sit down the next day and you're like, okay, what am I going to write about? And I would have a couple of glasses of wine, do the washing up, listen to some loud music, and be thinking about what I'm going to write for the following day. So when I was almost excited to have the opportunity to actually write.
Yeah. For me, the best days were when I would get it done first thing, or at least very early in the day, because then I'm done. I did my thing, right? Whereas otherwise, like I have this, I have it right now. There's over here on a certain door, it doesn't close properly, and I know I need to sand it. I open that door several times a day. I look at the part that needs to be sanded several times a day. It would probably take me 10 minutes to actually sand the door. But no, it's been, I don't know, 3 months times 4 or 5 times a day. What's that? Hundreds of times that this little thing has annoyed me, whereas 10 minutes of work would fix it from now on until it maybe it's stuck again. So same thing with your daily writing. Get it off your plate, get it out of your mind, and then it also frees up your mind for, guess what? Other fun things that you might be doing today, rather than taking up that space in your brain of, I got to do that work, I got to do that writing, I got to work on that chapter. Get it out of your decision-making, element in your brain, and that frees up other creativity and productivity as well. Just make the decision, get it done, ideally earlier in the day.
Yeah, and I think I think that that's sort of is maybe another technique, in the sense of not necessarily where you're okay. I agree, like getting it done early and all that, but there's also sort of the opposite of that, where it's like, if you're throughout your day where you come up with something that gets in your head, if you can, stop what you're doing and go and just write it down right there and then, get it out of your head at least, right? Because otherwise, first of all, you may forget it, but but it's also, that could break your writer's block. Maybe you were blocked earlier when it was your writing time, and that was the time you had, and maybe the pressure of that I have to write at this time was stopping you. And then later, when you're grocery shopping or whatever, you're like, you thought of something. Maybe you can't write it down, but you can hit record on your phone and say it into that, or you can type it in a little note app, short form, whatever. And then when you get home, or when you get to a place where you can write it down in more detail, do it. Because that's something I find for me, if I'm trying to sleep and I have an idea for something, I can't, there's no way I'm not getting to sleep unless I get that idea out of my head onto something. Otherwise, it's just spinning in my head all night. So I have to just write it down on my phone or record it or something. And then that's it. I know it's a weight off. I know I'm not going to forget it. I'm not going to fall asleep and not remember the details or whatever. It'll stop spinning when I get it out.
Yeah.
I find that works for anxiety as well. If you're like, oh my God, overwhelmed, you've got so many things to do. If you just like write down the list of things you've got to do, then you feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's you just moved it from one place to another, and that transaction helps process it, and then it's out of your system a little bit. And you can then take a deep breath and move on, because I've now accomplished that. Even if you just wrote it down, you're going to deal with it later, it's off of your immediate to-do list, taking up all this area here.
Absolutely.
Go on to
Now, unfortunately, we could probably continue this discussion for hours because it's fascinating. I'm really, really enjoying it. But unfortunately, we're approaching the top of the hour. So we're going to wrap things up. Bradley, thank you so much. I found this a really, really thrilling discussion. Where can people find out more about what you do and how you can help them?
The simplest is repossible.com, repossible.com. I can do things like try to spell my last name for people, but if we stick with repossible.com, we can start there.
That's fantastic. And whether you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube, there will be a link to repossible.com down below in the description as well. Craig, any final thoughts?
You know, I agree. This was an awesome discussion, and we can go on and on with it for sure. You know, I was thinking about this as we were going, and the whole writing every day, and I was like, do emails count? Because if they do, then I do write every day. I write lots every day because that's what I do all the day is write emails. But you know, whatever you can do as a writer, you want to write, and you should write because it's a muscle, right? And the more you work on it, the stronger it gets, and the more you'll want to write. You know, you're gonna have that drive to keep on going. So, you know, thanks for stopping by today, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again in the future.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
See, I think people are really going to like this episode, so we will hope to have you back. Anyway, thank you very much to everyone who has reached the end of this podcast. If you are listening to it or watching it on YouTube, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, that like button, leave a comment, share it with your friends, do all of that nice stuff. That would be awesome. And Craig and I will be back with another guest very soon for another episode of Fully Booked. Thank you very much.